Diversity, equity, and inclusion. These three words pop up everywhere, it seems like these days, but they are more than just words. They each stand for something very important, something that people have spent decades to achieve, and some that we are still fighting to achieve in society, in the workplace, and especially within higher education. And sitting along with me today, here is the voice of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the School of Social Work, Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work. In fact, she lends her voice to this issue across all of USC, including chair of the Provost Diversity and Inclusion Council, and co-chair of the Campus Climate Committee. She is saying it loud and she is saying it proud. Welcome the formidable Dr. Renee Smith-Maddox. You.
Thank you, Gabe.
It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
You look
thank
great.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Taking time from your busy schedule. You got your committees and all of that. But it's important work, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just committee, it's important work. People hear this. Can you operationalize, we often say that in this business, operationalize it for us? People hear diversity, inclusion, and all of that. What does it really mean? What is it about?
It's about transformation.
Okay.
It's about transformation at the individual level and the organizational level. From the standpoint, when you think about those three words, which we are ever so familiar with, we have to start to break it down and really get a sense of what those three words mean to you. Because what happens is you can think you know the meaning of things. And you could nod your head in acceptance to the meaning of things, but are you really committed? And what does commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like?
Okay, so let's talk about it. What does it look like?
What does it look like?
Well, you know what? What doesn't it look like? How about that first? What doesn't it look like?
What doesn't it look like? It doesn't look like DEI is in play when we don't have a diverse student population. It doesn't look like DEI is in play when we don't have a diverse faculty. It doesn't look like DEI is in play when we don't have a diverse portfolio of research that's being done that impacts a wide array of individuals and communities.
Including those people who are absent from the table.
And that is always a matter of question that everyone should have if they're around the conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's missing here?
You have to be around to raise the conversation. How do you raise the conversation inside of a homogeneous, dominant social structure that has really performed arguably well within its own framework? Do they feel like there is room, or should there even be allowed room in this tower that we've created? Is diversity sort of treading, on an establishment that is already there, and diversity has little to contribute to it? How does that work? Should we be a part of that tower that seemingly was built inside that homogeneous framework?
When you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to be strategic. It's a movement, and like any movements, you can go back to every movement you can think about, and it's been strategic. And you do need people on the inside.
Okay.
You need people to understand the realities of how systems of oppression works. And you need to have people at the table who have power to make decisions, power to leverage resources. So it's not any one thing. One thing I've learned about this work, you need allies.
Okay.
You need people
of all
sorts across fields that has a level of consciousness around the work.
You're going to have to explain that, a level of consciousness. What does that mean?
And I would say a level of awareness of how DEI can be disruptive in an innovative way in terms of disrupting inequitable practices and really thinking about in the work environment in higher ed, because that's what we're focusing on today, is how do you create a space and place for students, faculty, and staff to thrive, and not just thrive, but to be contributors to the mission of the particular school or entity that they're working for. So that means when we say consciousness, it's a matter of raising people's awareness.
Okay.
Okay? So, in many respects, it's just breaking it down to committing yourself to being a learner of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. And I can say that because I've seen a common thread in my own work experience, and it's always been around access, creating opportunities for people, working with the vulnerable population who, in my estimates, are the geniuses that you just need to ignite their light.
Absolutely, I could not agree more.
And what I have seen that the more mature and engaged and more responsibility I've had in this work, the more I need to sit and learn.
You don't just rush in. You go in, you learn. You ask questions before you give direction. You agree with that?
I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I will add that you learn how to develop initiatives, experiences, set up the conditions to dialogue where it's co-participatory, that you're not the only expert in the room.
Okay, now, that's a hashtag. You're not the only expert in the room. Wow, you're not the only expert in the room. That's difficult sometimes for people who are so busy on the other side, the researcher, the clinician, because we're doing the work to tell you how to govern your life better. I'm the expert to help you out. How do you train a clinician, a researcher, to sort of dial it back a little bit so that they can learn, they can hear the vulnerable population that they say they want to serve? What would you say to that?
There's more. The more is one has to be willing to be vulnerable in this work and to deconstruct who you are. And when I say that, deconstruct your biases, because we all have them. So I want to be clear.
Okay.
Not one of us are on the other side of bias. We all have them. But what's important is for you to have this awareness of your bias, to understand how it impacts your decisions, how it impacts your choices.
Okay.
Right? What you engage in. We all have a part in this. This is not something that's just a trend. There is
really.
It is not just a trend. And the reason why I'm going to say that, because we have research that has shown, not only in higher ed, but in the for-profit and nonprofit, when diverse teams are in play,
Yes.
the outcome is far more useful, far more applicable, and replicable and scalable.
Wow.
Okay, so when we
That's
think
big.
when we think about
That's
this
big.
work, my caution is not to use it just as a hashtag.
Oh, I'm with you on that.
Okay.
And see, sometimes I wonder if it sidles into that hashtag doldrum, and so then it loses a bit of its effectiveness, right? Because it just becomes sort of a perfunctory kind of response.
Well, we have to be realistic as well. A lot of people are very pessimistic with regards to the work. It's sort of been there, done that. Is this really going to make a change?
Okay, and Renee, right, but with good reason, though, right?
Absolutely. But this is when I go back to people like, and who we could say it, rest in peace, Ralph Fertig, Nipsey Hussle.
Oh, okay, see, now you didn't got deep.
Who reminds, and the reason why I bring up Nipsey, because it showed how someone in the hood, of the hood, can really make a difference.
Absolutely.
And where people, Tupac, I mean, the list goes on. And the reason why I think it's appropriate to mention artists and geniuses in other fields, because they were always about the people.
Right.
Okay? And they show how you can make a difference, but they also show the value of the people.
See, that's the part sometimes I think that if we're not careful, we'll find that missing, because you get so lost in the research in the laboratory, you forget that the laboratory is not where the real people are. Having you right there in the provost's ear, that really means something with who you are, what you look like. Your brand of genius is sitting right there. How do you, your level of effectiveness and your contribution?
I really understand the importance of symbolic, representation. To have an African American woman, who is leading. At the same time, I recognize the tax that goes along with that.
Okay.
Okay?
It's heavy, isn't it?
And it will always be for people of color who are in positions like this. But the point is, for our students, for our faculty, for our alum, for our board of counselors, to understand that they are partners with any one individual that they see are standing out and being the only voice. We all have to be a voice of this work. To your question, in terms of the strategic initiatives, it's only been almost 9 months. And in 9 months, it really caused you to think about what's that first 100 days?
Sure.
To where could you influence, and then you start to understand the reality of the context.
Okay.
So one of the things that I embarked on initially was to have the school engaged in a climate survey, a climate study. And that was a way to get the pulse of those who are here. What kind of experiences are you having in this school, at this university, in your classroom, with your peers, with your colleagues? And it's anonymous, so that people can feel free to really express those experiences. Now, it's a survey. It's rare that you will get 50%. Right. But the point is, it becomes, I would say, just some foundational information that will give rise to helping the organization, the school, think about decisions they need to make. Because what happens, an organization gets on automatic pilot. But there's many norms that are embedded in how we do business, how we treat each other, that remain invisible, but people are impacted by it every day. So from a organizational change and structure standpoint, you need to get that insight from somewhere. But we've also done something that I think is a good thing as a school. We have a diversity, cultural competence, and social justice course, and that just kicked off this year, and that's a required course of all of our students.
So that changes the climate even within our school, because it ushers in the kinds of questions and potentially inside of a classroom, those courageous discussions that otherwise may not happen. And
I want to add, there's been plenty of collaborative opportunities that I've been fortunate enough to initiate, whether it's with the NASW USC unit, where we co-sponsored race and equity training for alum, for students, for faculty, for staff.
The Hate U Give.
Yep, the Hate U Give. We did a screening. So creating the opportunities for us to dialogue. We had unconscious bias training with Dr. Bryant Marks, and again, open to a wide array of constituents in our school. So, and we have had sessions that we have named the DEI Learning Lab, so that our faculty can have opportunities to come and keep it real. And to be able to talk about those critical situations that they aren't sure how to navigate, or they're not sure how to navigate their own privilege, or how to talk about power, or how to talk about just all of the various identities that come into place and how you create that community of learning. So there are so many things that it's not that I initiated it, it's creating the space.
Well, I'm glad you're in the space to create the space, right? Because we all are learning and we all are the better for it.